Before we get married, like all of us are strong, capable, confident women. We don't marry people that are hurting us. We marry people that are loving us. It's that hope that they could come back around and be that partner again. And so letting go of that hope is so painful. Learning to be okay on your own doesn't mean that you're like alone and lonely all the time. It means that you find ways to fill your own cup.
Hey, Gina, welcome to the show. It's really nice to have you.
It's really nice to be here.
One of the things that really just struck me about your platform is really, and just the work that you do, it was such a perspective that I didn't even really think about. And I know this is not something that a lot of people talk about, which is you help women who felt invisible in their marriage heal. But this is the part that really struck me. Heal from the divorce they never wanted. I just want to just start there because I read that and I'm like, wait, but they felt invisible. Why didn't they? Let's talk about this. What led you to going all in on this niche and really like doing the work around this?
Yeah, well, for personal experience, right? Like I felt very invisible in my marriage and worked so hard to avoid divorce, which ultimately didn't work. But as I've worked with women in this space and I've been coaching for about 5.5 years, I've seen this pattern again and again, right? We get to this place where we either are forced into divorce by our partner choosing to leave, or we have endured so much disconnect and emotional pain and abandonment that we choose to leave. But regardless, it's the pattern that I see with the women that I work with. It's still outcome they didn't want. Even if they were feeling invisible or hurting or lonely in their marriage, the outcome they wanted was an attentive, connected partner. And so that feeling of invisibility is what they've been surviving in for years or decades. And even when divorce is initiated, they're now trying to make sense of the fact that they were hurting, their partner wasn't able to give them what they needed. They wish they could hold on to their partner, and yet here they are navigating divorce and trying to make sense of both of those things that feel kind of in conflict all the time, trying to make it make sense when it doesn't make sense. But emotionally, it makes a lot of sense because we take a lot longer to let go with our heart or to understand in our nervous system and our body than we do in our head. And so it's that space where I've kind of landed with helping women who felt invisible kind of learn to let go, learn to heal from that wound from their marriage, and then confidently step through their divorce and into the future that they'll create.
Yeah. I think as you were talking, I think what was coming up for me is I think you could feel very broken and unloved and lost in a marriage and still want to make it work. I think no matter, even if you didn't feel invisible or even if the person did something that was just totally heinous, like infidelity, I still think that it's just because it is such a deep, deep rupture in that relationship from going through this too. It's like, it's not just about the losing of the relationship. It's also just, it's grieving the life that we thought was supposed to be ours. And then you throw kids in the mix and it's like, I think oftentimes we as women too, sometimes, because we sometimes can be fixers, like it's like we can endure a lot to stay in what we think is what's comfortable or what's right or whatever that looks like.
And that I often hear comes out as like, I could have done more. I should have done more. Like if we would have had another 6 months or a year to try couples counseling, or if I could have worked on myself more, then it would have had a different outcome, right? So it's that they can start to see how it's not working, it's unhealthy, it's not, they've outgrown each other, whatever the catalyst is there to end the relationship. But there's this belief that they could have still done more to make it different, to have that different outcome, to save the relationship, even though it's hurting them.
Well, speaking to that women that you work with, and even in your own experience, who did feel or does feel like invisible in their marriage, how do you find that really impacts their healing journey after divorce? What does that look like for somebody after they get the divorce then, and as them trying to move forward?
Yeah, I have this concept that I've coined in my program, which is called the orbiting effect. And so when we are in a marriage where we feel invisible, we often subtly shift all of our energy and focus and mental capacity onto trying to be seen, right? Like we are trying to earn that love or connection or have our partner see us because we feel invisible. And in the process, we kind of detach from ourselves and start what I call orbiting around them. They become the center of our life, meaning that we think and believe, and it feels very true. It's not something we do on purpose to abandon ourselves, but we do end up abandoning ourselves and trying to receive what we long for and need and deserve from our partner. And so we start living by orbiting around them. We understand ourselves or can regulate our own emotions or feel confident or loved or at peace based on what our partner gives us. And so when that divorce happens and that person is removed from the equation, that place of being disconnected from ourselves, feeling invisible, it creates such this void and like vacuum of how do I even like figure out how to move forward? I don't even know how to be on my own, how to understand my own emotions or even like believe in myself at all. It creates such this emptiness. So I teach my clients how to disconnect from that orbit and come back and connect to themselves and kind of learn to see their own experience, see their emotions, see their highs or the pains or the moments in their marriage and in their divorce where they have felt invisible, learn to give that validation to themselves. And that's like the foundational building block to be able to then move through the divorce. If you feel like the center of your world is residing in another person, in another body, you are left floating out in space. And so we've got to be able to disconnect from them and come home to yourself, which is easier said than done, but it is very possible to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, like if women, this is not something that they address as they're healing through in their divorce, how do you see this pop up for women when they start to enter the dating pool again?
Yeah, they find a new person to orbit around.
Yeah.
They need that center.
I'm just curious, is there typically a correlation? And I only ask this because I am anxiously attached. I've moved to more of a secure attached style since doing a lot of inner work. But I realized when I got back into the dating pool that I am anxiously attached. And so I'm curious, do you find a correlation between women who maybe experience some invisibility in their marriage and then some anxious attachment style?
Oh, absolutely. I think they go hand in hand, right? Like when you feel invisible and you feel like you have to like prove or earn or qualify for your partner's love or attention or time, of course, that's going to create a lot of anxiety. And it just, those patterns just get developed and then they become so familiar that we just keep living in them. We keep repeating that until we address it.
And I also think that even if you were somebody who maybe didn't experience feeling invisible for the majority of your marriage, but then if something infidelity happens, then I think even just on a subconscious level, that slaps you right into invisibility, right? I mean, it's just trying to...
At the core of that, if somebody's stepping out of the relationship is not taking into account how that will make you feel. It's completely disregarding you.
Absolutely. Well, I am so curious, like, why do you think so many women struggle to let go of a marriage that's causing them pain? What for them is somebody maybe speaking to the woman who's in a marriage right now who knows that it is not serving her higher self and she knows it is not healthy for her and what she wants for her life and where she's at, but she's struggling to stay. Like what's going on beneath the surface there?
These kind of marriages that are unhealthy, that are toxic, that have betrayal, kind of a big umbrella of these types of marriages, they create what we call like hopium. Like it's this hope that if they just try hard enough, if they wait long enough, if they are loving enough or forgiving enough, that eventually that will like pay off. They will get the partner to be a better partner. They will get that love in return. And that's what keeps women, especially in unhealthy marriages, for so long, is that belief that they can work on themselves to become better. And if they just hope and try and wait and are patient enough, eventually they'll receive that partner that they were promised in the beginning, right? That hope comes from those initial weeks or months or years of getting to know the person when they're charming or loving or attentive and caring, right? We don't marry people that are hurting us. We marry people that are loving us. It's that hope that they could come back around and be that partner again, or that with just enough time and resources and encouragement and love, they can eventually like reach their potential. And so letting go of that hope is so painful. It's like the last piece to fall, because as you come out of these types of marriages and you start to see the unhealthy patterns or the emotional neglect or disconnect, you can see those things a lot more clearly as you go through divorce, but that hope is still there. And it just takes time to like grieve what it could have been and let go and kind of move into that place of acceptance of what it is. It's a lot more challenging because we think that when we have all the facts, when we can see things clearly, we should be able to let go. And it's just not how we work. Our hearts take longer to let go. And so giving ourselves grace and permission to love them or long for them or hope that they could be better as long as we need to is actually how we're going to gently teach our heart how to let go and find acceptance with what is. So
yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, there were some pretty heinous things that happened in my marriage that really set me back. And what these things happened, I went into hyper overdrive. Like, okay, well, if I can just, be that, the best wife, I can just do this. And I don't even know that it was like, in looking back, it wasn't a conscious thought.
No.
There were two weird things that happened to me. Number one, I definitely, in looking back, I can say that I definitely went into this overdrive of just, again, like trying to be the perfect wife, like doing everything, right? Then the other thing that I did, which was so, and I look back and it's just so, the other thing that I did was sexually, I went into this hyper overdrive. I think, I don't know, like I said, if it was either more of like a primal thing of like trying to like, almost like desperation. I went into this place of like such desperation. And that's like when I know I talk about like, I got to the point where I didn't even recognize myself anymore in the mirror. I felt so like lost and broken because I was in, going back to your orbiting example, like I had completely detached from myself, from what I wanted, and was just in this way overdrive trying to fix it. And so I guess to just share all that to say, like, it is so normal to go through that process.
Absolutely. I did similar, right? Like there was betrayal in my marriage and I went into like, I can fix this. I can be more sexually available. I can be more doting and caring for him. Like I can fix this. And I think that's where we get stuck. And it's also, I think, just culturally conditioned that that's how, like, that's a woman's role in the relationship.
Yeah.
We either directly or indirectly kind of learn that we are the caregiver or the fixer for the emotional part of the relationship. And so when that gets threatened or betrayed or broken, it's almost like we don't even have the conscious awareness to pause and like objectively look at the situation. We jump into that, I can fix this. I can bring us back together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I know like, part of what you do is somatic healing with people. And it's so important because you just go into this nervous system overdrive. And what's really interesting, and this was the first serious relationship I got into after my divorce, I realized now, like I repeated the pattern all over and again. Any sign that when he started pulling away, I mean, that is really kind of that like anxious avoidance cycle anyways, but I started going into like totally, again, going into the whole detaching from myself and just trying to figure out, oh, well, if I do this, then this will make this relationship so easy for him. And I mean, I look at that now and I'm like, what in the actual
look at the lens
fuck?
of that. It's like, if I make it easier for him, that I will get my needs met.
1,000%. And now I look at that and I'm like, girl, get your shit together.
See that at the time, right? Like that's kind of like a survival mechanism. I'm going to lose something. I'm going to be really hurt or broken or left behind. And so I'm going to hold on tighter to try to keep that from happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what are some of, for that woman like who's really struggling, who knows like on her conscious brain that the divorce is the right thing. She knows that, but she's struggling to let go. She's really having a hard time aligning her heart and her head. What are some practical strategies, maybe some of the very first places you take your clients through in your process and starting to move them forward in the healing process? What advice would you offer that person?
Yeah. So what I see with that place is a lot when I check in with my clients is there's this like kind of like this haze of confusion, right? If you're trying to let go, if you're trying to make sense of what has happened in your marriage, oftentimes are kind of in this confused space of trying to make something make sense that really doesn't make sense. Right? Like even if that person has stepped out of the marriage, even if you can see the marriage needs to end, all of those kind of like, why couldn't we try harder? Why couldn't he have done better? Why couldn't I have been more forgiving, right? Like it kind of creates this sense of confusion, which acts kind of like a shield that keeps us protected from the deeper emotional stuff going on under the surface, but it's a protective measure. And so what I always help or encourage my clients to do is we've got to get below that shield. And so what I teach them that they can do is what I call flipping the question. And so when we're kind of in that space where we feel confused or overwhelmed or like just trying to make sense of things, we need to kind of like settle into our bodies and we need to get behind like below that shield. And so for instance, when they have thought like, why didn't he try harder? Why didn't he fight for me? Or why did he choose someone else? Right? Like those kind of questions that just there's not a real answer to that's going to bring us anything.
Yeah.
What we do is we flip that to he chose someone else. He wanted out of the marriage, or I wanted out of the marriage, right? We want to simplify it down into a statement instead of the questioning and the thought. We want to make it a statement because what that's going to do is it's going to drop us into our body. And what it's going to always trigger or bring up, activate is that hurt, that sadness, that grief, but that's already there. And so when we are living in the confusion or that kind of like detached, protected space, we're not able to actually heal anything, right? We're not actually connected to any of the deeper hurt or wounds or pain. And that's like our body is just trying to keep us safe. So again, like as we heal and notice these things, recognizing with grace or compassion of this is just my body, my nervous system trying to protect me. Once we step in that space of actually wanting to heal through that, you have to be able to come back into your body. And so being able to flip those kind of questioning thoughts to a statement allows you to, again, detach from trying to understand them and come into what's happening to you. What's really happening is you're feeling heartbroken or, angry or sad. And that's where you have to sit and stay to be able to find healing and peace.
Yeah, God, absolutely. I know for me, I love that, that tip of like stopping the questions, because that is a very like unhealthy and destructive loop I think you can go down. I think it's okay. I know for me too, what was helpful for me was writing down questions and then revisiting them later when I felt a little bit more emotionally, but emotionally in a better place, but not from a place of trying to understand him, but more so being able to go back and look at those questions and see like, were there some questions in there where I could be owning my part? How could I use some of, again, still releasing any judgment or emotion from it, but just getting more curious with it, and I think for me too, you're asking the question, it's like, why, turning that, I love that example you gave, why doesn't he love me? He chose somebody else, or turning it into a statement. I think what was always helpful for me too, then was like looking at that statement and being, he chose somebody else. Like if that's the statement I was looking at, and then those saying, but what's the story I'm telling myself that says about me, right? Like I'm taking, because ultimately that's at its core, right? If we are heartbroken, yes, we're heartbroken for various reasons, but part of that, at least it was for me, it's like part of that is because if he wants somebody else, well, then what does that say about me? What am I telling myself it's saying about me? That I'm not lovable, that I'm not good enough, that, all of that, right? So,
And that you can't access that story or even be like aware of it when you're trying to understand it, right?
Yes.
In order that inner work, that healing work, that processing of your emotions, recognizing those beliefs and the meaning that you're making of it is completely off limits. It's unavailable when you are trying to understand them.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Well, you mentioned a little bit ago, speaking about it's very, very common is no matter if you initiated it or your partner did, I think it's very, like you were talking about that feeling of like, I should have done more. That really, I think the feeling that I know I even had that feeling, and it was just this overwhelming sense of like guilt. And so how do you help women to work through the guilt piece of it?
So that guilt piece that I could have or should have done more is what keeps us stuck in that is staying in our head about that. Even if it's unintentional, we're trying to figure out if there was a space or a book we could have read, if there was more we could have done, then we're kind of holding it against us, even if it's unintentional. And so in order to actually heal that guilt, you have to come into your body. And so recognizing that your head is telling you you could have done more or you should have done more. And instead of like staying in that space of judging or trying to understand again, to just come into your body and feel that guilt. So it just made, I feel a lot of guilt over this. And instead of fixing it in your head, staying in your body, just taking a couple of grounding breaths of this, I feel a lot of guilt over this. That's okay. I'm working on this. It's settling into our bodies, because so much of this type of healing I do with the women I work with is in our bodies, not in our head, right? We're trying to find healing and peace by analyzing things, by understanding things, by having the correct information or resolution in our head. And what we really need is to be able to just sit with all of the emotions that come up that are connected to those stories we tell, that are connected to the patterns we develop, but just be in our bodies and give that guilt, because it's not true. That guilt feels like it's our fault or we could have done more, but it's not actually the truth. If we step back and we look at all the facts and we look at the timeline and we see what we did try, we're not going to believe that in our body when guilt is like kind of calling the shots. And so again, coming back to that place of validating for ourselves, like I feel a lot of guilt over this. It's really heavy. I'm working on this. It's kind of like close the conversation, to let it be. And the more times we pause and acknowledge it, allowing ourselves to feel the guilt, the more we actually will resolve it and let it go. And then we'll be able to connect up to our head again that says like, look, I tried all of these things, all of these years, I did all of this, and that was enough. In order for us to believe that, we've got to honor the part of us that doesn't believe it and let that be okay.
Absolutely. Well, I want to shift gears here just a little bit and talk a little bit about trust. I think specifically really for women, really trusting that they will be okay after divorce. Why is this such a challenge for women, do you think? And because the thing is, as women, I think what we often can forget, listen, ladies, we were fine before we got married, and we will be fine after we get divorced. But for a lot of women, I think when that security is really rocked, it's just they lose a lot of trust within themselves that they're going to be okay. And so what are some things that you help women to do to rebuild that trust within themselves that they are going to be okay?
That's kind of at the core of everything I do. But so kind of like build on each other. In order to rebuild that self-trust, you have to stop orbiting around someone else, right? Like you have to come home to yourself in the sense that you can be in your body. You can recognize what your beliefs or thoughts you have. And then you have to begin to intentionally create new beliefs. And by that, I just mean doing like the work of being able to question, like, what am I making this mean? Is this true? What else could be true? It's kind of taking back that ownership of what beliefs about yourself, that doubt, that insecurity, that worthlessness, whatever those messages that we receive that kind of shrink us down. Because you're right, before we get married, like all of us are strong, capable, confident women.
Yes.
And we end up in these marriages with a partner that slowly, systematically, like makes us feel less than. And so we become smaller, we become less confident, we feel worthless. And then we get divorced and we're left in that space of feeling deflated, defeated, like broken down. And so in order to build ourselves back up, we need to be able to connect back to that person we were before. But we kind of have to shed all of those things up and placed on us, all of those beliefs and those criticisms and those like the doubt that has been given to us that is not actually ours. And in order to do that, we kind of have to look at each of those pieces, to kind of take the time to look at what is this? Why is this here? Why do I feel like I can't like be on my own after divorce? And explore that, rewrite those beliefs and allow our body to feel whatever comes up in the process. Like it's not, I'm a big advocate of not just doing that like positive thinking. Like we're not just going to tell ourselves like, we've got this, like we're going to do great. Like we can be happy after divorce. We have to take those baby steps of right now. I feel really overwhelmed by being on my own. Okay. I'm going to allow that overwhelm to be here. And I'm going to remind myself that I'm learning how to be okay on my own. I'm learning how to move through this and I'm going to figure this out. And that's how we build trust. We change the way we're speaking and thinking to ourselves. And then we take one little step at a time, reinforcing that belief that we will be okay and building that self-trust as we do it.
I love the way your healing modality and the way that you coach women with really incorporating the somatic healing, because I think I talk about this is that talk therapy it can be incredible. There's a place in healing for that as well. But I think there does come a point where you got to get out of your head and into your body. And what I love about even this simple process that you're talking, there's some simple steps that people can do. What I love though is that if you think about it, even just like consciously trying to get into your body when you start to go down that loop, if anything, it just breaks the loop for a second. It just allows you to pause so that you can stop going down the rabbit hole and attaching yourself to all of these thoughts that then are going to get your nervous system upregulated and all the things. I love just being able to breathe into your body again.
And that's a lot of the work. It's like recognizing when you're spiraling down, recognizing when those old patterns are activated and pausing so you can redirect. And it's not even mastering them or completely replacing them, because some of those beliefs, some of those things that we were conditioned about ourselves in those marriages just take time to heal and to rewrite. So it's not a race to the finish line. It's not that we need to like totally conquer all of our doubt or insecurities in order to be okay after divorce, but it's recognizing that we are working through those, we are changing those, we are building our self-confidence and self-trust, and those old patterns still come up. And when we notice them, we pause and pivot and keep moving in the direction we want to go after divorce. It's that intentionality of choosing, like, this is where I'm at. It makes sense why I struggle with this. It makes sense that I'm working on this and I know where I'm going to be going with this. And taking back that ownership and control, that you get to that control and that power to be able to create something different, even if you're not there yet.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I know, we talked about earlier that, if you are somebody who did, have a marriage where you felt invisible and you struggle with that and you got stuck kind of in that orbiting loop Gina's been talking about, and we talked about if you don't heal that, then you're just most likely going to repeat that same pattern. How does somebody know though, like they've gone through divorce, maybe they've been doing some of the healing work. What are some signs that maybe they're ready to date again?
So as much as nobody really wants to, like taking some time to be alone and at peace being alone is a great indicator that you've set a healthier foundation for your next relationship. It's not a foolproof that you're never going to repeat unhealthy patterns. And in fact, I'm a firm advocate, there's certain healing that will only happen in the next relationship you have. And there's only so much solo healing you can do before you're with another partner that's going to show you blind spots that you just weren't aware of. But learning to be okay on your own doesn't mean that you're alone and lonely all the time. It means that you find ways to fill your own cup, how you find connection with friends or community, hobbies or interests, right? Like you develop yourself as a whole person that doesn't need somebody else to feel content and happy. You can want someone, you can look for someone, but it's a very different energy if I need them to step in and make me feel okay versus I'm okay on my own and I want to share my life with someone. And then when you step into that relationship, just noticing when you start to kind of abandon those parts of yourself. That you're slipping backwards, which when you do, you pause, you notice, and you readjust.
Yeah, absolutely. This was one of the things that I really had to work on when I got divorced was not just being alone, but being okay with being alone. And one of the things I think that I realized, and my mom said this to me once, and she said, that being alone is a state of being and lonely is a feeling. Right? You could be alone and not be lonely, or you could also be in the room with somebody and still feel lonely. Right. And I think for me, I definitely jumped into dating very quickly after now I was separated for a year, so I didn't date during that time, but I underestimated really like once that I needed more time, like when the ink was actually dry, because there was like, even on a subconscious level, there was a state, I think, of like finality that I had not processed yet. And so then I jumped right into dating and that didn't really work out for me so well. And I had to like really, work on being okay with being alone. And now I'm at the point now where I swear to God, I had this thought the other day, which was now I'm at the point now though, to where I'm so comfortable being alone. I love my nights, like when my kids are with their dad and I have a night by myself, and I have a boyfriend, by the way, but when I love the night when I'm like by myself. And I thought to myself just the other day, I was like, man, how am I going to ever like live with somebody again? Because I really I like to get in my pajamas at like 5:00 in the afternoon. And so, so I think such great advice. It's like, I think a great litmus test is just being able to like be okay with being alone. And as I always say, and this too, man, when you can get okay with being alone, you put up with a whole lot less shit from people.
Which you need to, right? Because that's one of the like safeguards against getting into another bad relationship is you can now see and feel the difference. If you start dating someone who's shitty and offering you breadcrumbs, you're going to recognize it earlier on. You're going to say, no, this isn't for me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm curious too, are there any tips that you give your clients as they start to get into the dating world, if they've come from a relationship in the past, obviously where they felt invisible? Is there any advice that you recommend on how they communicate that to their new partner? Or are there any like things around boundaries that they should think about as far as, or is it really more so like just be checking themselves, because really it's their response. They jump into that orbit. It's really kind of something going on with them. I'm just so curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I definitely think it starts with notice what's happening inside of you, right?
Yeah.
Because that's going to be the most accurate indicator of whether someone is supporting and aligning with a healthy relationship, with peace, with supporting you. You're going to start to notice if it's unhealthy, you're going to start becoming smaller or quieter, not speaking up, sacrificing more, right? You can look back to the unhealthy relationship, your marriage, and recognize behaviors or patterns that became like gradual over time, but put you into that box. And so when you are dating again, you want to notice and just be aware for yourself if those things start to happen again. And most often you can feel that in your body more than you can see it outward in the relationship. So paying attention to if you feel kind of like you can't speak up, or you have to feel, a little bit more small, or do what they want because it'll make them happy, and you don't feel quite comfortable sharing that. You don't really want to do that. It's mostly noticing when you make yourself smaller to fit in that relationship. The next step is then to be able to talk about that with your partner, because a healthy partner will hear that and work with you to create a healthy relationship for both of you. So it has to start with you, but you have to also have that space to work with them. And like I said, a healthy partner will hear that and help you both feel seen and supported. An unhealthy partner will throw a fit, and that's your indicator that they want you small.
I read in a book once, and this always just stuck with me. Something along the lines of, you found a healthy relationship looks like somebody knows your triggers and the things you've been through and fiercely protects them, right? That's a healthy relationship, like understanding what triggers your partner. There is a difference between fiercely protecting, at least I think there is, and so I'm curious your take on this, and maybe you can explain it to the listeners, but I think that like there's definitely a difference between fiercely protecting what triggers your partner based on past hurts that they've had versus like walking on eggshells, right? And making yourself small. So maybe for the woman who has suffered in the past with being invisible, how does she know that fine line of, okay, my partner partner has baggage too, and I'm accommodating that baggage versus I am now like losing myself to accommodate the baggage. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do women know the difference?
So what I always say is that your partner needs to be bringing that up to you. Like, you can be aware of it, and you are, right? Like, most of the time, us as women, we're very good at being like considerate and caring for those we love and care for. And so it makes sense that you would want to kind of be gentle or understanding or like compassionate if you know that they struggled with something or have trauma from the past. Being aware of it is one thing. If they are not also aware of it and bringing up the conversations, for instance, if you kind of like stepped on their toes, if you accidentally triggered them, or if they feel triggered by something that happened between you, they need to be voicing that as well, so you work through it together. If it's just you like tiptoeing around it, because I know he's upset, I know he's had a hard day, I know he's hurting, so I'm just going to be extra quiet and good, that's walking on eggshells, and that's taking on the emotional accountability for his trauma, his hurt, and that's his to hold.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that was coming up for me, this is honestly, I've experienced this. I think more so for me, what I had to figure out was I was dating somebody who told me that he had been cheated on in the past. And so then what that looked like is he was then very jealous and very, he would say he was protective, or he was, you know, how they kind of, sometimes they'll use excuses around. So basically, he needed me to check in more because it's just, he had been hurt in the past and he doesn't trust easily. And so for a long time, I was like accommodating that in a very unhealthy way because I was trying to like, oh, well, you know, it's okay. Like no big deal for me to check in at the end of the night and stuff. And then I finally got to the point where I was like, I am 44 fucking years old. I don't need to check in with nobody before I go to bed. Like, what are we doing here? Yeah. And for me, I was just like, so I'm curious, like, I didn't know though, I really struggled at that. So how would somebody know if they are, you know, in that where somebody's maybe like kind of using their trigger as an excuse for poor behavior?
So I would say to watch if the other person, the triggered person, right, the other partner is doing their own work, because there's obviously he is triggered there, right? Like, of course, right? Like anyone would be triggered if they were cheated on. And so you can have a compassion, understanding, empathy, but you can't like walk on eggshells so he doesn't feel upset by it. He needs to be going into that jealousy, that fear, that anger, whatever is under the surface is his to work through with whatever professional he chooses, right? And then be able to together come together to create that healthy space for both of you. Because in that instance, he gets to have like what he needs to feel safe, but you have to sacrifice what you need to feel safe. That's usually something that kind of shows up over time. It's in the beginning, I'm sure it came from a place of like, I just care about you, and of course I'll help you.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So it's like watching for more of the pattern over time. Are you being accommodating and helpful and he's working on his own trauma?
Yeah.
Or are you just doing that for him and he's doing nothing?
Yeah. And honestly, you guys, like, this is the perfect example though of why you have to do your own inner work before you jump into a relationship, because I was operating from a place of, I need a relationship to feel okay.
Yeah.
I was not okay with being on my own. I was sucked into the orbiting, you know, situation there. I was making myself small. And when I was able to finally like pull out and really friggin' check myself, okay, you know, and I started to become okay with myself and understand my value, that's the kind of bullshit you stop putting up with, right? And that's what you stop doing, right? You don't deal with that. You're like, okay, that's, you know what, that's on you, not me. Absolutely. Well, I'm curious, you know, regarding the woman who you work with, talking about co-parenting for the woman who felt invisible in her marriage, she didn't want maybe the divorce. How do you recommend, or like maybe what are some of the first steps that you recommend that she do to just start to move towards a healthy co-parenting situation with this person?
Yeah. So I kind of see two scenarios often happen, whereas like get divorced, initiate divorce, and she wants to stay friends. She wants to do the things as a family or do like events or birthdays, whatever. She wants to kind of keep the family unit intact as much as possible, which is a great idea, right?
Yeah.
Or the other one that goes no contact or has to have healthy boundaries. And there's reasons for both. But I would say regardless, you have to heal from the ending of the marriage before you can have a healthy co-parenting relationship. Whether that means that you get together for kids' sports or birthdays or, you know, activities as a family unit, or you just see each other in passing when you're sharing, you know, drop off. You're always going to be triggered. You're always going to be feeling emotionally activated around them if you have not processed through your own grief or pain or betrayal, whatever is there. And so if you want to have a healthy co-parenting relationship with the co-parent and a healthy co-parenting relationship for your kids, you have to deal with your own shit. You have to go through the grief, the anger, the betrayal, because if not, every interaction is going to kind of like be leaking bleeding out
Yes.
on everybody and interfere with everything else. And so you have to, again, it always comes back to like doing your own inner work here. You have to be able to show up for yourself and process through all of that shitty stuff that comes with divorce in order to get to a place where you can be a healthy partner, healthy co-parent, a healthy parent, right?
Yeah.
We even will like leak some of that onto our kids unintentionally if we have not dealt with our own stuff. And so taking time to care for you, to heal you, to feel whole and complete on your own is how you show up in every aspect of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, I will just say this too. And I was talking to somebody actually last night, and she was like, and she was sharing her divorce story with me. And she was saying, you know, we were talking about co-parenting, and she was saying that she went through, there was betrayal and all kinds of terrible things at the end of her marriage. And she was sharing with me though, that now she's very, very close with her ex-husband, they're friends. And she said to me something that's very interesting. And I know this to be true as well. She says, I made the decision to get better and not bitter. And the truth is when it comes to co-parenting, honest to God, there will come a point that you have to just, no matter what's gone on, you have to just make a decision and you have to make a choice, especially like when there's kids involved, which is I am now going to look at this as a co-parenting relationship and I'm going to actively work. Sometimes it's every day. Forgiveness can sometimes be an everyday thing, but I am going to make this decision that I'm putting this behind me and I'm going to, you know, have a healthy co-parenting situation. At the end of the day though, just like happiness is a choice, right? Just like, you know, abundance mindset is a choice. This is a choice at the end of the day with the co-parenting situations. You just have to sometimes say, okay, I surrender and I choose to make this healthy. Well, I am just curious as we start to wrap up, if you could tell every woman going through an unwanted divorce, that woman who's really struggling, or maybe she's fresh out of just one thing about healing, what would it be?
I think the one thing I would share is that it's okay that it's hard. It's okay that you're hurting. It's okay that you're heartbroken and feel betrayed. There's so much criticism that women place on themselves. Again, with that, I shouldn't be hurting this much because he cheated on me, or I should be able to be okay on my own because I chose this. Whatever kind of shoulds we give ourselves or what we get from those around us, we get a lot of judgment or stigma around divorce even now. Whatever that elicits in you, whatever emotions come up during this process, it's okay. It's messy. Divorce is messy. It's challenging, but you're not stuck here forever. And so giving yourself that grace that I'm just going through a lot right now and I'm going to let myself hurt. I'm going to let myself cry. I'm going to let myself be angry. And then I will continue to figure this out is so important. We got to let go of that judgment to let ourselves be human.
Yes. Give yourself a damn break, girl. Okay. Last question is what, you know, I know you do a lot of incredible work with women and clients. And so I'm curious, like, what's the most beautiful transformation you've witnessed in a client's healing journey? Do you have a moment that you can recall, you know, maybe recently, or like an aha moment that a client had really struck you that was really powerful you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's the work that I do with my clients is often a very like gradual layer by layer, right? So we don't have a lot of ahas in the moment. But I had a client reach out to me that I worked with for a few months who we talked all the time, worked through all the time, kind of those triggers being triggered anytime he would send a communication or show up with the kids, whatever it was. It was constantly like the anxiety, the fear, the overwhelm would happen. And she reached out to me and let me know that she got an email from him and felt none of that.
Yes.
She saw the email come in and just kind of closed her phone. And in the past, that would have created like a whole 24 hours of anxiety and fear. And like, I got to figure out how to handle this. And she's like, I got this. Like, he doesn't have that power over me anymore to trigger me to make me lose my shit in order to help him. Right. Like, it's like, that's his business. It's not mine anymore. And that kind of like detachment from emotionally, that a lot of that orbiting effect is our emotions being tied up with what they do or say or don't do or don't say. And so being able to disconnect from that is a process. But when it happens, it is so powerful because you get to then decide, like you were saying, right? Like decide, like I'm gonna do this for my kids, or I'm gonna have this relationship for my kids. I'm going to create something beautiful for myself. And you're in that space that you believe it, you feel empowered to do it, you can figure it out, and you're no longer waiting for their permission for you to be okay. And so that moment was just powerful. And I've had many of that. It gets to that place where they have beliefs disconnected from that orbit. And when they see it, it's just incredible because I'm like, I know, I can see it happening. It's gradual. When they recognize it, it's very powerful.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for today. Thank you for doing the work that you do. Where can the listeners find out more about you, the programs you offer, how you work with women? Where should they reach out?
Absolutely. So I'm very active on Instagram. I'm at confidently_divorced on Instagram. Instagram. But my website is also Confidently Divorced, where you can find out information about my group coaching program and reach out to me anytime at either place. There's contact information for me.
Amazing. Gina, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This has been a great conversation.
Thanks.